So good morning, Tim Winkler here from Future Campus. I've got Mark Selkrig here from the University of Melbourne. Mark, you've got a really interesting project looking at the lives of academics and change. Can you tell me, for a start, why are you looking at this area?
Tim, look, it's an interesting thing. I suppose one of the threads through my research and scholarly work has been the shifting and changing nature of educators' work. And when I use the term educator, I use it broadly, whether it's teachers, academics, artists, those who are involved in doing some sort of teaching work in various guises. And few projects we've done previously, and this one sort of has captured my imagination a little bit, given the continual cut and thrust of higher education that goes on, and being in the phrase I use a lot is the hurly-burly of higher education, and kind of what's happened prior to the big COVID kind of incident, and then kind of since. And I was involved in a project many years ago when I was at Victoria University, where we looked at uh, the phrases we used were for people to provide us with some materials around what teaching was, what research was, and what service and leadership was to them, through using various means, images and text. And so since then, we've kind of moved on and moved forward, and the world's changed in relation to what's possible with digital work. And so this project, I think, is situated in that space where we know that kind of any workplace now is really fluid and dynamic, and lots of change occurs. And we were really keen to see how kind of academics, I don't want to use the phrase managing, but navigating, I suppose, that kind of world of work. How do they kind of make sense of the continual changes that come, and how do they adjust and regulate it for themselves? Because sometimes higher education settings can't do it for you.
So the survey that you're doing, the project that you're doing
Yep.
is called Turning Point. I see you've got an international group of collaborators in
Yep.
on this. Why are you aiming to get responses from Australia specifically, and then compare it with a couple of other countries, or where's your thinking in terms of who you want
Look,
to
I
hear?
suppose we're kind of looking, we've been brave, and we've kind of, in trying to work out who our focus was, we kind of thought, do we limit it to particular academics in particular discipline, or whatever, or locally? And no, we kind of thought, let's be a bit brave here and go as broad as we can. So it is an international survey with colleagues there's two other colleagues here at the University of Melbourne, Associate Professor Kim Keamy and Dr. Nikki Dolfer, who's involved at the University of Melbourne, and Dr. Troy Hefferden from the University of Manchester, and Professor Christina Brunella from Helsinki University involved. And we've kind of devised it to see, it's kind of also, well, fishing's the wrong word, but we've kind of opened it up to academics everywhere. So in any discipline, in any faculty, at any university, and we'll see what comes of it, I suppose, is the way we're thinking about it. I have a hunch we will probably, a lot of our participants will be from Australia, but the nice thing about it is you never can tell where these kind of things finish up, with tools like social media to promote what you're doing as well.
Now, why the mixed media approach? You've said it'll take about 15 minutes for people to respond,
Yep.
and you'll be asked to think about your experiences through the lens of text, imagery, and music. Why so?
Well, look, I kind of always intrigued in pushing the boundaries of what is and what isn't research. And, coming my background, which is in arts education, which is still a kind of a passion of mine, and how meaning can be made in many ways in the world. That's, for a long time, research is still kind of seen in traditional guises of numbers and text, really, in some ways, to think through. And if we want to consider problems in other ways, and also kind of have been formed by other kind of ways of seeing the world or understanding the world. I figured this time we would kind of see what we could do. we're used to playing with imagery and text. My background is another project we've been involved in recently, which has been a really fun project in the field of teacher education, where we've been talking with or seeking the views of teacher educators, given, again, the hurly-burly of what happened in teacher education. And what we've kind of discovered is that, those who work in the field are actually quite silenced, or their voices are very not heard very much. And so this project was around asking those who work in teacher education to tell us about the delightful and troublesome and hopeful dimensions of working in that field. And this background here is some of that data, particularly around the hopeful dimensions of working in teacher education. And so you can see there's some small text responses there, but we also ask people to provide us with images. And I think if you look at that kind of collage of images there, there's a real message we get from just seeing and looking at images rather than analysing text. So again, working with that kind of background, this time around, we've actually decided we'll work with AI this time. And we're rather than asking people to provide us with text images, which sometimes with busy people they can provide us with images that we're not able to use them for publication purposes because they breach copyright or whatever. But this time we're asking for them to describe us an image, which we will then put through an AI image text to image generator. And also we're asking for some a bit of music or a song that kind of represents their change. And knowing, as a teacher educator or working with people a lot is, music is something that kind of resonates with a lot of people. And we just figured there might be some interesting stuff, because we'll ask people to provide us with a little bit of a description as to why they describe the particular image they did or the particular piece of music. But I think what we will come up with some is very interesting data around, along with, we're asking for traditional short answer responses. We're not kind of ditching text completely as a response, but using their text response along with imagery, which we can, I'm hoping we can do other representations. Like these posters for this project have been really powerful in representing people's views rather than kind of just having to write it. They're turned into posters and such like. And my earpiece just fell out. And with the imagery, we're keen to see what we might come up with playlists of some sort, where, certain playlists around kind of certain themes as to why people chose particular pieces of music that might kind of show kind of types of representation. So we've got some ways of thinking about this, but we're also kind of on a journey ourselves as to what comes of this.
That's super exciting. So I could imagine out of this, you could have journal articles, you could have an exhibition, you could have a concert. It's a whole lot of interesting ways to look at knowledge translation as the result of a project. Can you tell me, in terms of scope of the project, how long do people have to provide their input in and do the 15-minute survey? And are you hoping for tens, hundreds, thousands?
Oh, look, we're hoping for as many as we get. It's one of those things of putting things out there. So, and whether you hit the right spot where something arrives, we've had a database that we've used. So we've sent that to a group of people and asked them to forward it on through their networks. But yeah, depending on when an email lands in someone's email, we can realize that it might get buried and not be worked on. We launched the survey or the survey tool on Tuesday of this week, Wednesday of this week. And it's been encouraging hearing back from people, and it's been encouraging to hear some of the responses so far, where some people have kind of said, great survey, really like the music and image question, and where other academics have replied saying, really like this survey. I've entered the text response, but image and text, music and image, not my go. And so people don't have to provide the image and text. So none of the fields are forced, but we kind of want to see what we gather. As far as it being open, we haven't actually put a closing date on it as yet, because I'm also aware of time and place and working through. My sense is we'll have it open for a good 6 weeks or 2 months, we think. We'll need to probably send out reminders and using social media prompts through that to kind of see what we can do in recruitment there, but kind of aware that people ebb and flow as to where they're able to do things.
Something that pops to mind also is there are a lot of stereotypes about different disciplines and how they like to conduct research and how they like to express themselves. Is there a concern that you may get fewer responses from perhaps, you know, the hard sciences or or people who see themselves as very numbers driven, as opposed to people who are, you know, open to more creative responses?
Yeah, look, that's a hard one, Tim. Like that's an assumption we can make, and it's probably, you know, maybe there is some merit in that. I think partly the responses will be driven by who I know and who my co-researchers know and how we've sent out, who our followers are and who our networks are. Where most of us, well, we're in the field of education, so, or in the HASS disciplines, so that might also limit as to who we, you know, kind of hit with on the mark. But I kind of, you know, I don't want to kind of stereotype academics. I think academics are stereotyped enough in many ways. So again, you know, those kind of who think differently or work differently, which I'm hoping that's what academics will want to do, might be someone who does work in a kind of purely numbers and stats driven way, will kind of go, this is interesting. Let's have a go and see where it takes us. So, you know, we'll just see.
Absolutely. Now, I know also in the introduction to the page that you have here and the Turning Points project, it says, we want to explore what it's like for academics who've been working in universities and other higher education settings over the last few years. We all know that, as you said in the introduction, it's been a tough few years for many people, and there has been enforced change and change that people have also needed to make for themselves to cope with those times. Are you concerned that there might be a lot of fugues and funereal music in the a pessimistic tone could overwhelm things a little, or is it? I know it's a completely open approach, but do you have any sense of where this might go?
Look, no, I don't. And, you know, that was sort of some of the real ethical concerns we had of kind of, you know, sometimes lifting up a stone, sometimes you need to be careful what's there. And also, I suppose, we're aware that, you know, people can choose to not participate at any point in time and all of those provisions that we've put in place. But I think what we were really intrigued with was seeing this as an exercise in people kind of being able to try and, as I said before, how they've navigated the space. They might be reacting to a negative or a bad situation, but they've kind of done something with their practice as an academic that's allowed them to, I hate using the phrase survive because I think it's more than survive, but kind of work in a system where, you know, the system continually asks more and more of you, and the work of academia seems to ask more and more, you know, more publications, more teaching and whatever else. And how are people regulating that for themselves? I suppose the agentic capacities that we have, and they might only be small things. When we're talking about a turning point, we're asking for someone who's kind of going, I'm going to do something differently. It might be, you know, not attending to my emails as often, or stopping working at weekends, or the turning point might be very similar. But we're also keen, the other part of it is that the turning points that have taken, I think we've called them holding points, and those points that have endured. So, you know, are not a bit, we hoping we get things that aren't like New Year's resolutions that you think, I'm going to do this, and in 2 weeks' time it unravels. It's kind of like, I've done this and it's kind of stuck with me. But we're also kind of keen to see how these shifts might push back or influence faculties and universities as well. Because a lot of the time we know that the policies come down from above and there's consultation, but also ways of how do we humanize those to realize that some of that generic one size fits all approach is not the case for us, because, well, not the case in any organization, because each of us kind of, the complexities of who we are and what we're working with, and particularly since COVID, all of those things come into play now as to how we kind of make sense of the world we're in. So this is about finding those spaces where we, academics can kind of actually do some of that work.
I reckon this is a really exciting area, Mark. So just congratulations to you and your colleagues on finding an interesting way to explore HR without making it sound like HR. To look at people's lives and the experiences of people. I'm really looking forward to talking to you further about this as the results come in.
That'd be great,
We'll
Tim.
do a
Yeah.
virtual exhibition or something
Sure,
to
that could be
try
great.
and explore what's there, because I think this is something which is going to be of great interest to a whole range of people.
Yeah, I look, we really hope it is, and as we said, it's kind of the, the language of HR, or whether it's people and culture, or some of those phrases that are used in higher education. Just well, there's not as many corridor conversations happen now as used to since COVID. The presence on campus and whatever, but connection with others there's. I think there's a strong sense around, it feels like becoming much more, Ruth Barkan's work of kind of, it's a much more corporatized managerialist world we're in, and the language sort of starts to become very dehumanizing. Or if it is, it's kind of it's a systemic approach that kind of, as I said, doesn't equate for the variables, which we all are in it. And I think this is a chance to, instead, whether we take the line of speaking back, is one way of thinking about this, in an activist kind of approach, which I'm all for, but also kind of a respectful way of actually kind of presenting findings to higher education providers and go, look, what can you learn from this in managing and thinking about workforces of the future? I think, particularly what we're seeing in things like, school education, is that the shortage of teachers, and teachers not wanting to work in a work environment that is so managed, controlled, regulated, that I think we are in a big shift at the moment, and how we adjust to that. Places like universities are big machines, and they can sometimes, they're slow. Yeah.
Absolutely, slow but
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Well,
thanks very much, Mark. Really appreciate the chat, and
that's
we'll
great.
look forward to catching up once the results come in.
That'd be great. And look, hopefully, Tim, through whatever networks you have, and those who are listening to this, to please, if you can send that link on to whomever, we're just at the base now of people kind of circulating that through the networks. I want to get some emails from some academics saying, stop sending it, I've received it 15 times.
Absolutely. And so I think if people Google University of Melbourne turning points, then they should find the site.
They should.
Judging by the URL. So
yeah, great.
that's great. All right.
No worries,
Thanks very
Tim.
much for your time.
Thank you. Pleasure.